All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive on something that kind of flips the script on something we usually take for granted when we're talking about games.
Okay.
Competition.
Yeah.
We're looking at why I don't play competitive human versus human games anymore.
Interesting title.
It's an article by game designer Reactorcore, and get this. They actually think competition is harmful to games.
Oh.
Even toxic.
Yeah. That's a pretty strong statement.
Yeah.
Especially coming from a game designer.
Right.
You would think they would be all about competition.
You'd think.
So what's their reasoning for this?
Well, it's a very provocative stance, for sure,
Right.
coming from someone who designs games.
Yeah.
But what's striking is how Reactorcore connects this whole idea of competition not just to games, but like to a wider societal context.
Oh,
They argue that it's a human-made concept. It's not some like natural force.
interesting. So not just like survival of the fittest kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Not part of some, Darwinian idea. Reactorcore points out how we've kind of layered competition on almost everything, from school to work, even our hobbies.
Yeah, that's
We're so used to like ranking ourselves against others, it's hard to even imagine things without it.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically every game. Most games have some type of scoring system or leaderboard
Right.
or way to track your progress against other people.
Right. It's almost like the default.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we need a game.
Right.
How do we make it engaging? Competition.
Yeah.
So I can see where they're going with this. But isn't a little competition a good thing? I mean, it pushes us to improve, right?
That's what we're always told.
Right. Like iron sharpens iron.
Right.
It makes us better.
That is the common belief, yeah. And it's exactly what Reactorcore is challenging in this piece. They're arguing that this constant comparing ourselves to others can actually hold us back.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on like personal growth and enjoyment, we get stuck in this win-or-lose mentality, which can lead to stress and burnout.
Yeah. They're not just talking about theory here either. They have some pretty intense personal stories to back this up. They talk about like seeing friendships fall apart over competitive games.
Wow.
Where what was supposed to be like a fun night turns into a grudge match.
Oh, yeah. I
Right?
think a lot of us have been
Yeah.
there. We've seen it happen firsthand,
Mm.
or maybe even experienced it ourselves.
Yeah.
That moment when you realize everyone at the table is taking things way too seriously,
Yeah.
and the joy is completely gone.
Right. Like, how did we get here? This was supposed to be fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Reactorcore argues that this isn't just a coincidence. This isn't just like, oh, some people can't handle competition or are sore losers.
Right.
They're saying that this is actually built into the nature of competitive games themselves.
Oh, okay. So it's not just that some people are bad losers. It's like the games themselves are setting us up for these meltdowns.
That's the argument, yeah.
Mm.
They lay out what they call the life cycle of a competitive game.
Okay.
And it's not pretty.
Uh-oh.
It starts with excitement, right?
Sure.
Everyone's kind of on a level playing field. They're discovering the game. But then skill gaps appear.
Okay.
And that's
Right.
where the trouble begins.
Wait, so even if no one's being like a jerk or anything, the game itself can kind of become the problem?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, think about a game like, let's say, insert a popular competitive game title known for its steep learning curve here.
Yeah.
Initially, it's fun for everyone to learn the ropes. Right?
Sure.
But as some players master the mechanics, others inevitably get left behind.
Right.
And that gap leads to frustration for some,
Okay.
a sense of superiority for others,
Yeah.
neither of which is great for a healthy community.
No. And then I bet that's when the cheating starts to pop up, right?
Exactly. Players who feel like they can't win legitimately start looking for shortcuts.
Right.
And then you get into this whole arms race of anti-cheat systems, which Reactorcore argues is a huge waste of developer resources
Yeah.
that could be used to make the game itself more enjoyable.
It's like fighting a symptom instead of the disease.
Exactly.
Interesting because they contrast this with games designed for collaboration or like single player experiences.
Right.
They argue that those tend to have like longer lifespans
Okay.
and less toxicity. Is it really just the design that makes the difference?
That's what Reactorcore is saying. They're arguing that the very structure of these competitive games leads to their decline.
Okay.
Even the winners in these games end up with a kind of tainted experience.
Yeah.
Because their success is built on someone else's loss.
Yeah.
It's what's called a zero-sum game.
Right.
Someone has to lose for someone else to win.
Yeah, you're right. It's built in. So even if you're the best, it's kind of a hollow victory in a way.
Yeah, that's the argument.
Hmm.
And then you've got the developers who poured their heart and soul into creating these intricate games,
Yeah.
only to see them potentially die out because of this built-in self-destruct mechanism.
Right.
It's kind of tragic when you think about it.
Yeah. They're making a big claim here, saying these games are actually harmful, not just to the players,
Right.
but to the whole industry.
Yeah. And they actually get into the economics of it,
Oh, wow.
which is pretty eye-opening. Imagine the cost of developing one of these complex competitive games, all the art, the programming, only for it to have a short lifespan because its very nature drives players away.
Right?
It's like building a house on a fault line.
Yeah, you're setting yourself up for failure. So
Exactly.
they're not just saying competition is bad for our feelings.
Right.
They're saying it's bad for business, too.
Yeah. They don't hold back.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is. And it gets even more interesting because Reactorcore isn't just pointing fingers and complaining.
Yeah. Okay.
They're offering alternatives.
Oh, good.
They actually design games that try to break out of this competitive mold.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm really curious to hear what those alternatives look like.
me too. Well, instead of focusing solely on winning or losing, these games prioritize like collaboration and shared experiences.
Hmm.
They're designed so that players kind of succeed or fail together,
Okay.
which fosters a sense of community and camaraderie.
That sounds like a breath of fresh air compared to the cutthroat world of competitive gaming we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It is.
Can you give us an example, like what would one of these games actually look like?
Sure. Imagine a cooperative game where players take on the roles of explorers venturing into an uncharted wilderness.
Okay.
The environment is really challenging, full of puzzles and obstacles that require teamwork and communication to overcome.
Okay.
And the focus isn't on competing with each other, but on working together to achieve a shared goal, like survival and discovery.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty radical departure from the every player for themselves mentality that
Yeah.
dominates so many popular games these days.
Yeah.
Do these non-competitive games actually catch on, though? Or are they just kind of a niche thing? They might not always be chart toppers, but there's definitely a growing audience for games that offer something different.
Okay.
And Reactorcore argues that this shift is not only possible, but necessary if we want to see the gaming industry, like, evolve and thrive.
So they're saying that sticking with this competitive model is actually going to hold the industry back.
In a way, yeah.
Okay. I can see how that could be appealing to some players, but let's be honest, competition is kind of baked into human nature, isn't it? I mean, it's what drives us to be better, to achieve great things.
That's a really common assumption, but Reactorcore argues that it's a misconception.
Okay.
They say that the desire to improve and achieve doesn't have to be tied to beating someone else. Instead, it can be fueled by the joy of learning, the satisfaction of mastering a skill, or the thrill of collaborative creation.
So they're not saying we should all become pacifist hippies and just sing Kumbaya.
Right, exactly.
They're just saying that there are other ways to tap into that drive, that ambition,
Exactly.
without turning it into a blood sport.
Exactly. They point to activities like rock climbing, where the challenge is to conquer the mountain, not to defeat other climbers.
Right.
Or think of a collaborative art project,
Yeah.
where the goal is to create something beautiful together, not to outshine each other.
I see what you mean. It's about shifting the focus from me versus you to us versus the challenge.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that make games less exciting, less engaging? Don't we need that element of competition to keep us on the edge of our seats?
Not necessarily. Think about those intense moments of a cooperative game where players are coordinating their actions, trying to outsmart a challenging AI opponent, or racing against the clock to complete a mission.
Okay.
Those situations can be just as thrilling as any competitive showdown.
Okay.
But the emotional experience is totally different.
How so?
Instead of anxiety and frustration, you feel this sense of shared purpose and camaraderie.
So it's less about the adrenaline rush of victory and more about the satisfaction of achieving something together.
Exactly. And that sense of shared accomplishment can be incredibly powerful and rewarding,
Okay.
creating bonds that go beyond the game itself.
Yeah. I mean, you hear stories about people who meet playing online games and end up becoming friends or even more.
Right. It can definitely happen.
All right, I'm starting to see the appeal. But how does this apply to us, the listeners? I mean, we're not all game designers.
That's a good point.
Hey.
Well, Reactorcore's ideas go beyond just game design. They challenge us to examine how we approach competition in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
Are we constantly comparing ourselves to others? Striving to be better at the expense of our own well-being and relationships?
That's a pretty big question. It's like they're asking us to reevaluate our entire value system.
In a way, yeah, they are.
Mm,
They're asking us to consider if the zero-sum mentality,
right.
this idea that someone always has to lose for someone else to win,
Yeah.
is really serving us.
So what's the alternative? Just give everyone a trophy and pretend everyone's a winner. Doesn't that kind of cheapen achievement?
Not necessarily. It's about recognizing that success doesn't have to come at the expense of others.
Okay.
It's about finding fulfillment in personal growth, collaboration, and shared experiences.
I see what you mean. It's not about eliminating challenges or striving for excellence.
Right.
It's about reframing how we define success.
Yeah.
And how we measure our own worth.
Exactly. And Reactorcore believes that by embracing this shift in perspective, we can unlock a whole new level of creativity, innovation, and human connection. Not just in games, but in all areas of life.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful message. I have to admit, this deep dive has really challenged my assumptions about competition. I never really considered the downsides or explored alternative approaches.
It's easy to get caught up in the game of life
Yeah.
and forget that there are other ways to play. But Reactorcore reminds us that we have a choice. We can choose to compete, to strive for dominance,
Right.
or we can choose to collaborate, to create, to connect.
So are they suggesting we all abandon competitive games altogether?
Not necessarily. They're simply encouraging us to be more mindful of our choices, to ask ourselves what we're seeking from these experiences,
Okay.
and to be open to exploring alternatives.
That's a great takeaway. It's about being intentional with our time and energy and making sure the games we play,
Yeah,
literally and metaphorically, are actually enriching our lives.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe by stepping outside the competitive arena, we might just discover a whole new world of joy, fulfillment, and meaningful connections.
Well, on that note, I think we'll leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. What would a world look like if we shifted our focus from competition to collaboration? Could it be a world with less stress, more creativity, and stronger communities?
That's a question worth exploring. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep playing.